Hey everyone, Steve Richard here, Momentum 2020, and I'm joined by two really good friends. I mean, we've been friends for a long time. We used to sort of compete, remember that?
Oh God, a long time ago.
I remember one conference that we were at, and you came up to me and kind of gave me remember the one-liner, Trish?
No.
So you're the shits that are stealing my clients.
You were stealing mine?
Forever ago when we were doing the sales training business for a while, but we weren't even stealing them. They were still your clients too, like in Eloqua, for example, Keith Neal.
Oh, they were using both of us.
They're using both of us. So, but you
were the little shits.
We were. Oh, and we wore that loud and proud. And I'll tell you what, and we've really enjoyed getting to know Trish and Matt. So they're both with the Bridge Group. They are the Bridge Group, founders of the Bridge Group. It's the best inside sales consulting organization out there, period. They've been doing it for the longest with the most companies, mostly originally sort of a focus on technology companies, I believe, but you've kind of gone beyond that and you have a lot of different industries represented now, right?
Yeah, I would say we're still 90% tech and 10% other industries.
Yeah.
We do what we do.
And if you think about and talk about, go-to-market models, leveraging inside sales, digital sales, virtual sales, you pick the name. Frankly, we should drop all of that now in the pandemic world, because now you're into like the sales consultancy, and what you're getting from the Bridge Group is kind of no BS. The other thing that they're very well known for is they have more and better data on what's going on out there in modern selling organizations than anyone that I've seen. I think that the big boy analyst firms out there, I'll let them be unnamed, it's more esoteric. It's not as concrete and actionable. There are, I'd say, just like this raving, tribe of lunatic fans that waits for, and that's true. I mean, I say that seriously, that wait for your benchmarks to come out every year. And I know a lot of them. I'm one of them. So we're fortunate that today, Trish and Matt Bertuzzi are going to be showing us some new data that is this is the release date today, right?
Today, as of 9/9.
With that, take it away. But we're going to make this a conversation. And as you're watching this, please do, if you have questions about individual slides, our style is, as you can tell, a little bit more organic, a little bit more authentic, free flowing. There's no scripts over here. So if you have a question about data that you're looking at, or you disagree or whatever, just write it in there and we're going to talk about it. Okay. We might even unmute you. What the hell? We do crazy stuff like that all the time. All right.
Excellent. All right. Everybody, in theory, you can see my screen. So hopefully this slide advance will work. Okay. TB, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So quick intro, and Steve, thank you for all the kind words. But I am Trish Bertuzzi. I am the founder and CEO of the Bridge Group. I am also the author of the Sales Development Playbook, available on Amazon. Been in business 22 years, worked with over 400 different companies, and we are passionate not only about the art of selling, but the science behind it, hence our benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
Matt?
And I'm Matt. I am the less famous Bertuzzi. I have a less popular book, but I am better with numbers, so that has to count for something.
Matt is one of the best revenue operations minds you'll ever meet, and he's sort of positioned himself as being the guy behind Trish, but we're pulling him out today.
Yes, I know. This is. I'm usually staring at spreadsheets, not Zoom, so this is very exciting. So today we're going to share a bunch of new data, as Steve had said. So there's some of our data, some of our to-be released data. We're doing our biannual SDR, sales development metrics and comp research right now. So I did a pre-cut to get some stuff in there. But we're also using a few other pieces and trying to tell like one story from the top down, right? So like here's the macro economy. What does it mean to the CFO, to the CRO, to the revenue teams, to you?
Yep.
So
I just want to set the stage though. So there's being a data geek, which is Matt, and then there's being a sales brain, which is Trish. So this is not fluffy stuff we're going to be delivering to you. So if you're a sales development rep or an AE or even in management, hang in there with us, because I think for anyone to be successful, particularly in this economy, you got to see the big picture.
Right.
And that's what we're going to present to you today is the big picture. Yeah, it's a lot of numbers and a lot of data and you'll be like, oh my God, but just hang in with us. And I think you'll find it'll be a learning experience.
And we tried to wrap it around a story. So it's not just feeds and speeds.
Yep.
All right. So even though this year feels like a decade, if you think about last decade, it was pretty amazing, steady growth. So 1.5, 3% annual growth rate in the broader U.S. economy. Quarterly up, quarterly down, but generally amazingly positive times. Last quarter was truly, or the second quarter of 2020 was truly record-breaking. Like a lot of media reported the top line number, the annualized number, negative 32% growth. That is huge, but if you think of it on a quarterly perspective, the economy in the U.S. in Q2 was at 91% of Q1, or 91% of a year ago. So 9% is a huge chunk when our economy is as large as it is. The thing that interests me is this, they talk about the V-shaped recovery, the K-shaped, some people go up, Zoom info, some people go down, energy stocks, that's the K-shaped, or the new one I'm hearing is the swoosh, the Nike swoosh recovery, down hard, up a little, but then very slow to come back. So as we think about the rest of this year and the next few years, this is data from the conference board, and it's really an open question of when will we hit the all-time highs again, right? When will this economy break where we hit in Q1 or January 2020? And as you can see, the base forecast is end of 2021. The optimistic forecast is mid 2021, and the pessimistic forecast is not worth mentioning. It's not good data. So where we are today is essentially a growing economy, but not like the last decade. So I think if we bring this is how it worked in 2012, 2014, 2018 mindset into 2020 and 2021, I think we're going to not set our teams up for success. So I want to talk about where we are today and the harsh reality, but I think there's a lot of upside too. So CFOs have had conversations that a lot of reps and operations people and even CROs have not been a part of. So they have reported to the board some changes. So throughout this presentation, we're going to talk about a fictional company, IPObound.ai, right? This is a fun company that is on the IPO track. They're VC funded. They have, on January 1st, they had 130 employees. They had excellent ARR growth year over year. They did 14 million in 2018, did 19 million. That's 36% growth. And then they said, all right, we're even going to beat that this year. So January 1st, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, they're going to do 42% ARR growth, be a $27 million ARR SaaS company. They were going to burn some cash, growing companies do, right? So their free cash flow margin was negative 21%.
Okay, wait.
Completely reasonable.
Right. So I'm glad you explained what FCF was, because when I first started this, I was coming up with all swear words for that acronym, but it's free cash flow.
Free cash flow.
Who are not finance literate. The other point I'd like to make, just getting back to the Nike swoosh groove or the K or the recovery thing, I think as people who run businesses and people who run sales teams, we need to understand that it has never been harder to plan.
Yeah.
Never.
Absolutely.
People used to do annual planning. So starting around September or October, people would start their annual plan. We'll back up the bus, because now it's monthly planning, because the shifts and the dynamics are so crazy. So, I think it's important that we realize that not only have the numbers changed, but the way we relate to those numbers and plan with those numbers have changed as well. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, IPO bound. This is our company, January 1st. I'm going to use some metrics from KeyBank Capital Markets. This is a really amazing piece of research. They do it on an ongoing basis, but the latest edition is the COVID edition. I mean, isn't everything, but I really like the way they took a look at things. So using some of KeyBank's data, we're going to say, okay, we know what IPO Bound's plan was Jan 1. So what's their plan at the end of this month, at the end of last month, right? So the median company, based on KeyBank's data, has done a reduction in force. They did some degree of layoff, so now they have fewer employees. Resultantly, their burn rate, their free cash flow margin it's negative, but it is decreased by half. So it is closer to cash flow positive. Their burn rate has slowed, but also, or resultantly, depends which way you think causation runs, their 2020 growth rate has been halved. So they thought they were going to be a $27 million ARR company. Now they're going to be 23 million. So we're going to talk about what flows from that. Flows from the slowing the burn rate, decreasing headcount, and lowering or level resetting their growth expectations. This is our data. We tracked, as everyone did, the crazy 40-day period from the second 2/3 of March through May. We found roughly 40% of VC-backed companies had done a reduction in force, and another percentage had done hiring freeze.
Right, which is crazy. I mean, the reaction when reality hit about what was going on in the world of business, the reaction, I mean, I can only think of two words: swift and fierce.
Yeah, absolutely. It was truly unprecedented, and it felt scary because you didn't know how big the snowball was going to be rolling downhill. I have June and July data, and it's more or less stabilized. Hiring freezes have been let go, and layoffs have grown a little, but nothing like that exponential growth we saw in April.
Yep.
So we know from KeyBank, because I forgot to mention, the survey takers for KeyBank are CFOs.
Mm-hmm.
So they are answering what they are telling the board. They might not be telling the reps, but that's what they're telling the board. So we know they've reduced their 2020 plan. We know they decreased burn, and we know they've done reductions in force. But the median CRO, from my data, has not had their 2020 number reduced. They still have the number, which was the number on January 1st, April 1st, and September 1st. So,
all right, let's think about that. Let's think about that. The realities of that for everyone that's in sales. So the CFO and the board have a number, and that number has been reduced. We didn't get the trickle-down effects of that into the sales quotas for the CRO.
Yep.
So, CROs always have some level of buffer. I mean, Steve, I'm sure you know this, having built quotas. CROs typically, you put out there more quota than your number, but CROs got stuck with this number, and, therein lies their anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you're the CEO and the CRO like I am, and you can reduce your own number.
There you go. Perfect.
Just
All right.
Let's golf, and it's okay.
The way we're going to build this up is we're going to start with customer success, right? The existing book of recurring business. So you're the CRO. You have a number. What are you thinking from a customer success perspective, or existing business, existing logo? So again, back to our fun company IPO Bound AI. Of that $8 million growth between 19 and 18, you can roughly expect 3 million of new ARR upsell and expansion out of your customer success organization. You have to balance that with, and this is KeyBank data, 12.5% gross dollar churn, which means January 1st to January 1st, $100 because of cancellations and reductions becomes, I forgive my math, $87.50, right? Some accounts shrink, some accounts go to zero, some accounts expand.
And Matt, I also want to make sure that the non-tech companies that are watching this understand ARR, annual recurring revenue.
Yes.
But here's the reality, because this is how it ties back to the storyline. If you got, sales teams who have been farming existing accounts and existing relationships forever, what you're going to find is that there will not be as many of those as there were before.
Yes, absolutely.
And at the same time, we're still seeing that there's some promising growth in the existing base that stays with you. So if the customers stay with you, you will get some growth from that, but it sort of sets that up for this. I just want to make sure y'all think of it from that standpoint. You don't have to understand SaaS metrics to understand what this means. It's pretty straightforward. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So net retention is essentially the sum of all those.
Thank you.
It means 19 million ARR, $19 million book of customer business comes in. Some are going to leave, some are going to shrink their footprint, some are going to double their footprint, some are going to grow 10%. Net, we're going to grow 104%. So if you think of churn, the inverse of churn is net retention. So as churn goes down, net retention goes up, vice versa. So that's where we were January 1st. KeyBank finished this survey data on the 31st of May. So I understand what they did. They basically took the churn that had been reported by CFOs, divided it by 5, because we're 5 months in, and multiplied by 12 to say, okay, what is the impact to date of COVID on customers canceling with you, or not, basically reducing their spend with you? So it increased, right? I mean, that's logical. Like specifically if you sold to restaurants, like that's your renewal rate. If you sold to restaurants will not be as high in 2020 as it was in 2019.
Or my poor friends, Matt, at Upside Business Travel, one of our customers.
Yeah. Yes.
Essentially is no more. I mean, all their people are now at other companies.
Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, those are like, we call them massively affected industries.
Yeah.
The closer you are to the epicenter, the more the shockwave you feel.
Right.
So KeyBank found churn was 12.5% last year, and they projected 13.9% this year. This is actually not as bad as I had expected.
Right.
And I think it's actually undercounting. I've done some research with our clients, and my numbers are closer to 15% gross dollar churn. And the
Get 'em,
interest, yeah, I know. I was like, I'm the bearer of excellent news.
Yeah.
The part that really stuck out to me is this 97% net retention. The point of the SaaS business is that your book of business grows every year. Your existing logos spend more than the ones who leave you. So based on what I'm seeing, and again, this is a trend that could easily reverse in Q4, potentially, not easily. I'm saying this CRO of IPO bound is going to have to expect a actual net retention decrease, breaking the buck, going under 100%.
Yeah.
Which means,
yeah, go. Sorry.
No. Which means if you're the CRO, you used to count on revenue from the customer success organization, them paying you. Now they're taking from you, and you have to get new logo to compensate.
Right. So that's a seismic shift.
Yeah.
Right there. You know, when people are just quickly looking at numbers, I'm like, 7% difference in net retention, whatever. But when you think about how you can't go back to that well to get more, well, you can in a certain extent, but you have to go get even more new logos, which is even harder than ever before. You know, that becomes substantial. I mean, you know, when we talk to our clients, we say things like, guess what? Retention is the new acquisition. And it is. So if your organization hasn't taken a really good hard look on how to make sure you maintain your customers, your cross-sell and upsell functions are not only spot on, but handled by the right people. Like, don't make your customer success people try to be salespeople. Like, you have a great sales development team. Why not focus some of them on your customer base? I mean, you really have to look at everything differently when you really understand the numbers. Yeah,
like, did you see in Henry's slides on the keynote, they had like that map of the customer with all the different interactions and which was like what's on time, which was delayed. Like that's the way you need to do it today. Yeah. You can't count on people renewing because you're a good tool. Like good tools are dying like left and right, not because they're not good, but because the bar has risen slightly above.
Well, so what a segue, Matt.
What a segue. Yeah. So now we're going to talk about more theoretical or tactical responses to this new data reality. So the old rules of renewal, I always say, is the 3 Ps, but 2 matter. TB, do you want to go?
Oh, sorry. So yeah, so I think, you know, it's the rule of 3 Ps. So tools always were there to make us more productive. Better, faster, more, cheaper, you name it. And then, so there's productivity enhancing tools. And then there's popular tools, like the reps love them. You know, they're fun to use. The reps feel they really help them out. They're motivated when they use them, whatever. Well, while those are still important, there's a new P in town. That didn't sound right. But anyway, I'm going. So there's a new P in town, and that's profitable. Like, I always say to people that ROI has made a comeback. I mean, we always thought about ROI, but Matt, can you, unless I'm stuck, can you highlight the profitable one? Okay.
Yep, it is highlighted. Yep.
Okay, sorry, I was hung. So before, people would just have these massive technologies budgets, right? Tech stack budgets, and they'd buy everything and everything. They'd buy any bright, shiny thing that they got sold, and they were getting sold, by the way, and no one really thought much about ROI. Well, that is now in the rearview mirror. Like, you really have to think about, if you want that tool, can you prove that it makes people more productive?
Right. And the other piece we're seeing is, it's not just that like your widget does X, it's that for $50,000, does your widget give a higher wins against or wins above replacement than someone else's widget for $50,000, right? It's like, not just that it works, because of course it works in theory, but does it work better than this budget would work somewhere else in the organization? And we're seeing a lot of that. And that's a conversation. It's not a muscle a lot of people have been stretching or working out recently.
Right.
All right. So
by the way, I enjoyed the geeky reference to wins above replacement. That was
thank you. Yes. Okay. So Marty actually talked about request to delay annual fees. That's actually something we're talking about on the AE side, and we're seeing it a lot. That we'll talk about it in a bit, but yeah, that's a huge point. It most certainly would come up in renewal conversations as well.
Yep.
So the second larger trend, in the olden days, what's the joke people say? What's the date of, like, today is like March 350th, because that's what it feels like, literally. In the olden days, imagine you were an organization that bought business B2B intelligence data. A lot of the decisions are dispersed, right? This team buys this, and then they also buy this because they're great and complementary. Then the SDR, maybe you have your inbound org wants this, your outbound org wants that, your AEs all have to have this, and the CSM's like, well, if they're getting budget, we're getting budget too. So imagine this is a fictional company's revenue teams spend on different tools.
Right. By the way, no logos were harmed in the making of this slide.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not recommending, we're not saying, these are just representative samples.
If Zoom goes up, if the ticker goes up, I want credit. And if it goes down, it wasn't us. Yeah. All right. So in the olden days,
Henry?
yes, in the olden days, we would see renewals at the team level generally, right? Marketing decides what marketing uses. The CSMs decide what the CSMs use. The SDR manager does not decide what the AEs use. What we're seeing now is that renewals are much more zero sum. Where in the old days, maybe everybody renewed or most things renewed at slightly different user levels, maybe lower, maybe higher. Now we're seeing a much more holistic view of what are we spending on vendors. And in this example, so we had 5 vendors. We expanded Zoom. So Zoom Info is now on the CSM team. So we increased our spend with Zoom. We cut to 0 our spend with Seamless and Lead IQ, and we halved our spend with Sales Navigator. So like, these are the types of conversations. It's not everybody on average renews 104%. It's somebody goes to 0, somebody goes up 25, somebody goes down 50. Like, those are the renewal conversations we're seeing. And it's a new motion. It's a new thing for a lot of customer success organizations to be that competitive. All right, back to the data side. So if you're the CRO, you have a number. The CFO has a different number, but that's not what you can do about it. And you can't count on customer success building you up to your number. At best, maybe the 19 is 19 and you're on the hook for another 5 or 6. At worst, they're going to go down $1 million and you have to come up with another $1 million of new logo. So back to our old plan, we're going to grow the company 8 million, and some will be from existing logo, some will be from new logo. Now the new reality, so 750,000 roughly is of new existing logo business is shrinking. So my team has to grow 5.7 million. New business, new logo. We're seeing from a headwind perspective, finance involved. DB, do you want to talk about this?
No.
Okay, so we're seeing
This. I'm sorry. My slides are lagging.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about this. Thank you, Matt. So the sales process is different, right? Getting to engagement is now the hardest part of the sales process, and closing has made a comeback, right? The art of closing, not the technique of closing, the art of closing. So what I want to make sure we prepare our sellers with is, what are the new rules of closing, okay? You're going to deal with procurement if you're dealing with a big enough company, and you're going to deal with legal. And they are going to want to negotiate, right? No more, I'm bad to the bone, too bad for you. You have to be ready to give to get. You don't want to go in blindly giving to get. You want to be prepared. Like, what are my options? What are they maybe going to ask for? And how am I going to respond to that, right? You're also going to, I'm not sure who mentioned it now, but someone mentioned people want to change annual billing and maybe go to quarterly billing, right? We live in a time of uncertainty. Like, we don't know if we're going to Nike, swoosh recover, K recover, whatever the case may be. So is quarterly billing something that you're willing to go with? Terms are getting extended. Nothing I hate more than having cash out of my pocket, right? Makes me crazy, but sometimes it is what it is. So you got to think about, what are you willing to accept for payment terms? And if you give those payment terms, what do you get back? Once again, give to get. And then if you don't think the CFO is part of this, he is. So you better have your numbers ready, on point, prepared as you start your closing process, because if you don't, your competitors will, and you'll lose the deal.
Trish, can I add a point here? So this is fascinating, because there's a ridiculous dichotomy right now between the buyer behaviors for the user buyers versus the economic buyers that I'm seeing. And it's even more stark than it was before. So in our sales process, we put down all the business's mandates and critical business issues on Google Slides, and we do a solution presentation. We try to do it prior to the demo if we can. User buyers have zero patience and tolerance for that whatsoever. They stop us a minute into it. Even we say it's gonna be 5 minutes. They stop us a minute in every single time and say, show me the damn software. I wanna see it, all right? So they have no patience or tolerance, but yet they know they need it. And we then later have to pull them back into it to say, look, you're going to have your CFO involved. Here's what's gonna happen. We have to be prepared for this business case. And then when we get them to buy in and kind of get on our side of the table, then they build those things out. And you're right, in most cases, they're presenting, and in some cases, we're presenting to the CFO and CEOs of companies that I am shocked that they would ever even want to talk to us, but they are now. It's a different world. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, you brought up a great point, Steve. So many times in the sales process in pre-COVID days, we would find an internal champion, and pretty much that's who we sold to, the internal champion. Yeah, sometimes we know we were selling to committees and we'd involve more people, but our internal champions have always done all the heavy lifting. That internal champion does not know how to do this in their own organization. We need to arm them with data. We need to be prepared to give them what they need to have these conversations. And we need to educate them in a way that obviously makes it possible for our deal to move forward. Don't think they automatically know how to do that. They don't.
Yeah. No offense, procurement. We love you. You're the best.
And one more quick tip for the salespeople that are on this, or the managers, quick tip. Ask the person you're talking to, what have they purchased in the last 6 months and the last 12 months? And it's a telling question. You'll frequently hear nothing. And if that's the case, then now we know we've got a real uphill battle. If they have, at least they have a little bit of a roadmap of what it looks like.
That's a good point. Yeah. What have you purchased since, March 21st? If it's nothing, wow. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to share some HubSpot data that is positive. I will no longer be Matt the Downer. HubSpot has put this publicly available using their customer base, anonymized and segmented, what they're calling the marketing and sales benchmark data. So, and this is interesting. On Henry's slides, I don't know if anybody saw this, but he had shown it like that dashboard metric where the AEs were by months, and I saw a pretty big cut through through April and May. So not as deep as this, but there was definitely, even the gods of Zoom info saw a March, April, June pain from this. So this is widespread. But at this tier, 26 to 200 employee HubSpot customers, new deals created, deals being opportunities in HubSpot CRM, Salesforce opportunities or HubSpot deals. So that you can see first 4, 12, 13 weeks or 10 weeks of the year, pretty normal, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Then everything, new deals stopped. I mean, that makes sense. We went down 30, 40%, which was actually not that surprising considering how scary and weird things were. That people were still sourcing 70% of their track record was quite impressive. And then a slow rebound to like the 4th of July, and April we're back up. We're north of trend. We're making back up. We're closing the gap, which is great. The slightly less rosy picture is on deals closed, which makes sense. Things lag. You cannot close that which has not been opened.
Ooh, what a great quote.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of people, you can actually see that the trough here was even deeper. A lot of deals were lost to literally COVID. Like we're trying to get our feet under us. We're doing nothing now. 6 months, 3 months, we'll talk later. But we're seeing a strong trend for increasing closing deals from the HubSpot data. So I actually like this. I think this is good because it's so hard to know where you are versus others. You know where you are versus plan, and the plan went out the window. But how are you doing versus others?
Yeah.
So the way I think about it is at the AE metric level, right? So again, IPObound.ai. Let's say they had 12 reps, 12 AEs, 20K annual contract value, 26% win rate, which is pretty good for that ACV. So that means the AEs are closing 600K of new ACV a year, right? It's 2.5 wins a month. Very sustainable pace. Using the HubSpot data, I modeled it out with the exact same data, a massive slowdown in new opportunities, and then a lagging increase in deals won. And this is what I found. Assuming the ACV is held constant, which I don't have any data to say companies are selling smaller deals now, like I don't know. My estimate of the full 2020 year win rate will be 19%. That's a 7 percentage point hit to win rates. It's not insignificant. But, and this is where the 2020 paradox hits. For companies that reduced AE headcount, it's the same mathematic effect as an increase in territory size, right? The US and Canada was 12 AEs and now it's 9. So in essence, everyone's territory was increased. So even with a lower pipeline velocity, lower win rate, but because they have fewer AEs, they're still closing reasonably the same full year new ACV. So for those companies that have reduced headcount, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing maybe 10-ish% below the 2020 forecast. And for those that have not reduced AE headcount, you get a much bigger hit. It's just the nature of the beast. Steve, are you seeing similar things?
Yeah, it's incredible how similar it is. And the thing that's surprising to me, Matt, is that they haven't made a whole lot of adjustments in terms of how they work with, train, support the existing people that are there. So it's sort of like this bizarre thing where it's very like business not as usual, and then businesses as usual, and it's like,
yeah.
Oh,
So
what
here's,
is, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Good point. Because here's the reality of the now. All of us, I don't care who you work for, your biggest competitor is status quo.
Yeah.
And when have we ever trained our selling teams on how to sell against status quo? Never. So that's a huge area for improvement that management teams, SDRs, AEs, they should all be beating down the doors of their sales enablement teams for like, how do I sell against status quo? Because I'll tell you, when I talk to someone and they're like, I'm losing to status quo, I'm like, give me your value proposition. And they give it to me. I go, you're a vitamin. Yeah. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, You're a vitamin, not an aspirin. You're a nice to have, not a need to have. Fix it.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
the reality.
There's that, this is like as old as time. There's people only buy things to what's it like? Make money, save money, reduce risk. Like that's like at the trident, 3-pointed spear. It
Yeah.
always used to be make money was the biggest tong. Like every tool will 5x your whatever results.
Yeah.
And in this environment, make money is not the one to lead with as often. Like if I called you and said, Steve, we're going to 3x your renewal rate, you would hang up on me because you know I'm lying.
Bullshit.
Right? Yeah, you'd call BS. But
Yeah.
if I said we're going to reduce risk, we're going to give you a 3-month head start onto your accounts who aren't going to renew.
Mhm.
Like that wasn't super sexy 12 months ago, but it's pretty compelling now. And like reduce risk is just more of an interesting proposition than it used to be.
I'm gonna throw in what someone we got here. I think Kaylee's been very active. I'm gonna shout her out here. Do you think that market share will start to become more and more important though? So for example, are we starting to see more of a movement towards monopolies, towards oligopolies, those kinds of, the giants type of a thing? We've seen that in other downturns in the past. There's consolidations. First question there.
I mean, there are category winners, right? So, I mean, Slack. Talk
Yeah,
about
brand new category. Yeah.
Yeah, realistically, Salesforce, although we certainly love sugar
Boom.
and pipe drive, as our
Yeah.
customers love sugar and pipe drive, but
think-
they're getting there.
I think Matt said it. If you look at massively impacted industries as sort of the epicenter, the further you move away from those in your total addressable market, the better off you're going to be. I think there's going to be the people who had the big wins now are going to stay the category leaders in all likelihood.
And I think it's like we only see the quarterly data from the public companies, and they choose their renewal and churn and retention rates very carefully. So it's so hard to disaggregate like what's the real deal. But I'm just hearing more stories of we have A and B. B is not as good as A, but it does 80% at half the price. Let's just consolidate. So it's like, it's not because they're bigger. It's for some reason the business case is better, or the sale or the renewal rep made a better business case, or they had better data. So they knew that they were using A in another team that procurement wasn't aware of, and procurement gets a win. Hey, we reduced our total spend. So it's like, how do you?
And I'll tell you what, I'll give you another one. Or
please.
the vendor company provided the buyer with more assurances and access to more senior executives. I'm seeing more and more sales leaders and sometimes, business leaders get on calls to try to get a save or get an upsell or something like that. And that actually parlays nicely into another one of her questions. She said, do you think it's more important than ever to arm champions with direct quotes or testimonials from other CFOs or other CEOs who have previously bought your product? That's interesting because we never think of customer testimonials or, in terms of CEOs and CFOs, but in some ways that's what it's, So what are your thoughts on that? I never even thought of that before.
Let me spin it.
Yeah.
Because testimonials, quotes, I'm like, it's marketing gobbledygook.
I think so too.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I never buy it. Having said that, if you could do a short video from that CEO or that CFO that said, look, here's why we evaluated the product. Here's how we evaluated the product. Here's 2 data points or 3 data points on why we choose them. Bam, I'm a happy customer.
Yeah.
That, no marketing fluff.
It's just something about hearing a person in their own words with their like.
Yes.
It's different than like if you said the exact same thing in text. I don't know why.
We're in the era, more now than ever, era of human to human.
And I'll tell you this too. I think the authenticity is there, and a lot of it is just like, guess what? The kids are probably going to bust in that door behind me, and you're going to see them on the screen. And who?
Yeah.
It happens to everybody else out there. What's the difference? You may not be wearing pants right now, Matt. We don't want to see, but that might be the truth.
I certainly don't want to see it.
I see Sarah here saying, I like this, arm champions with why they should talk to us now rather than before, when things settle down with COVID. The more of these authentic testimonials, the better. So you don't need marketing. Just pull your phone out or do a Zoom call or pull up Loom is a nice free tool that I love, or a Vidyard or whatever, Go Video. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah.
And all right, we're going to stay on track. Matt, how are we doing?
We're good. We're doing well. All right. So now we're going to talk about so we already talked about what can we expect from customer success. What do the AEs have to do? Now we're going to support them, right? How does sales development feed or support the AEs with new pipeline? So this is our data in our 2020-2021 SDR report. It is ongoing. Literally, I did a cut before we even finished the thing. So this is the first 300 or 400, let's say 300 responses. So how different are things than they were 2 years ago or 18 months ago? So again, back to IPO Bound, they had 4 SDRs on January 1st because they have 12 AEs. That's a 1-to-3 ratio. Reps are the SDRs were doing 15 meetings a month. They were sourcing 15 meetings a month. That's like roughly 2 million and change in sourced pipeline per SDR. Good number. Not massive, but at 20K ACV, it's pretty good. You know, it's hard to do much more. They've kept the ratio the same, but because the AEs had a decrease in headcount, they've reduced 1 headcount for the SDRs. Now it's a 3-person team. The biggest thing we're seeing, and I've seen from the data, is, so I don't ask what are reps doing, I ask quota, and then I control for how many are at quota. Quotas are lower. Quotas are lower. And Trish and I were talking, a January sourced meeting for your median tech company is way more qualified than a August sourced meeting at that same exact company. Like you literally, it's like a different world.
It is.
So
it's a different world, and we need to belly up to that bar, because here's the deal. The biggest point of pipeline leakage is in the discovery call. So if your discovery call process is not flawless, you're going to waste a lot of those 13 meetings. So, you know, we all focus on our SDRs. What are they doing? What's their process? What's their message? What are their metrics? Focus on your discovery call. Is it valuable to the buyer? Is it moving the sales process forward? Or are you just trying to bant the shit out of them, right? We have to be very, very careful about how we handle those discovery calls, because 15 to 13 and it's not the same kind of meeting, you don't want to waste one.
yeah, and it's just the reality, right? If you're sourcing more qualified meetings than you were in February, that's amazing, great. But most people aren't, and AEs should not expect that they're going to get that from their SDRs.
Right.
Okay, so specific to this, we want to talk about in our last data source, our last data series, 2018, 2019, what we saw for SDR qualification, we basically 4 buckets, right?
Yep.
Fog the mirror, which, Trish, what's the nicest way to describe that?
They have a pulse.
Yes, a meeting with a buyer with a pulse. That's fog the mirror.
Yeah.
Then with the next tier up in qualification is an introductory meeting, which is like maybe the right profile a little bit more. Then a qualified meeting, stricter still, and fully qualified, the strictest. So you can see these are the breakdowns. The majority fell in the middle. And a good, almost a third were fully qualified. So those are strict meetings. So here's where we are now. This is data I literally pulled last week. The number of fog the meeting qualification criteria has almost doubled. People want at-bats, and they're just willing to, if you can get me in front of them, the AEs will take the meeting, which what's the opposite of lean? In the fat times, reps' calendars are we have to protect my calendar. That's not good enough. It's in the lean times. Thank you, sir, Madam SDR, for that wonderful meeting with the person who's like, why did I take this meeting again? You know, like you need the at-bats. So we're seeing a shift down the qualifications, like strictness continuum, which is what you'd expect. You got to build pipeline back up. You know, being strict is not going to give you more pipeline. So one thing, so that's the SDR level, and we want to kind of take it macro. We want to talk about all revenue generating teams, reps, managers, everybody together in the last few minutes. We want to talk about hiring. So I've been really closely following open recs, and I'm not seeing companies asking for more yet, more experience with tools, more years experience, more what have you. I'm not seeing it yet. But the hiring teams are definitely being more discerning. And the thing to keep in mind, if you're a candidate or if you're a hiring manager, is we went from like 1.5 million unemployed. I use Fred data, 25 years or older, associate degrees, a general sales profile. We went from 1.5 million unemployed people 10 years ago or 5 years ago, down to 500,000 in let's say December. We're now back at 3 million. That's 6 times. There are 6 times the amount of people looking for work in our profile than there were 8 months ago. So hiring teams are being more discerning and they're getting more in, and you have to be careful not to spend a lot of cycles on it. You know, you have to be a little more diligent because there are LinkedIn posts that are in 24 hours getting hundreds of applicants.
Right.
I don't know how you keep up with that.
Well, here's the whole thing. So you have to change your process. Like if you're still hiring like you were a year ago, what are you doing, right? You have the ability to uptick talent right now because they're there in the talent pool. But to do that, you might have to change your job description. You might have to change a little bit of your comp plan. And maybe it's time, by the way. You might have to change how you interview. Like, you know, Matt and I talk about it in the sales development playbook, you know, different things you can do. Do a web survey first, do an assessment. You know, there's a lot of great candidate assessment tools out there. But if otherwise you're just going to be going through cycles. You're going to get burnt out.
Like right? I have a friend who's interviewing, and a lot of the hiring managers are still in the selling mode. Like they're selling the company, selling the job for like 12 minutes of a 15-minute phone screen. And I was like, they could have asked the same amount of questions in 4 minutes and then done 3 times as many screens. It's just like, it was a quick shift. It was a quick shift to having 6 times the amount of candidates.
Yeah.
Okay. This one I think is super interesting. New thinking about the office. So we asked essentially for your next 1 through N hires, open recs, what are you doing? 13% because they're either back in the office or they're going to be shortly, said we're hiring local only. We're a Boston company, we're hiring Boston talent. 46% or nearly half said we're hiring anywhere now, but the general idea is someday we would like those people to be in one of our offices, right? So they'll either move, we'll have a satellite office, or we'll figure it out later. 21% said fully remote, which I guarantee you was not that high if I had done this last year.
Correct.
That's a lot. It's not the story that Slack tells or Zoom tells, no offense to companies who benefit from work from home, but it's still a lot more than I thought I would see for sales leaders.
Matt, I'm just real quick challenge the attendees to put into the chat here what is challenging, what's difficult about the hiring remotely. I can tell you right now, onboarding is so unbelievably hard, and I don't care what the job is. But if you're working with an existing team, it doesn't matter to me at all. It doesn't seem like, we're operating just as effectively as if we were in the office, but boy, the onboarding's tough. That's me. Sorry to interrupt, Matt.
No, I totally agree. And my last data point on this is the most honest people are the Black respondents who said, we're just unsure. We don't know what we're going to do.
Right.
So as you think about this, so the benefits of remote now, but who knows in the future, are huge. You have wider access to talent. But maybe because there's 6 times the applicants, you don't need it. So I don't know what people are doing, but are you heading back? At this point, you need to know if you're heading back in 2021. I'm
also going to give you an optimistic view. I can't believe how fast I'm seeing people get hired. Our labor market is incredibly flexible.
Yes.
Incredibly flexible. It's like the opposite of Europe, you know?
No offense, Europe. Yes, I totally agree. Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
All right. So then Trish, why don't you take this one?
So it's September. Guess what? Your team has figured out, I'm not going to make my OTE this year, right?
Yeah.
Unless you've done something drastic. They've kind of known it all year, but it's September. They know. So now is the time to be super creative with your comp plans. So maybe you can pay more commission for things that come in October and November, like get people super motivated about bringing stuff in. Maybe you can do kickers for better payment terms. Now is the time to really get creative, boring, but compensation is always drive behavior. What is the behavior you want for the next couple months with specificity, and then pay them on it?
Yep. Like I see a ton of chatter in the sales subreddit about people who just made it to the mid-market AE role that they've been looking for like 5 years, and their comp plan was like, finally I'm gonna 160 OTE, and now they're like, there's absolutely no way I'm gonna hit that. So like it's more of a grind, knowing that and not being in the office and dealing with everything else. So how do you try to alleviate some? How do you generate some excitement for the final haul? DB?
So there's a lot of different things that we have to provide our teams with. I mean, there's a lot of comments about the challenges of being remote. So what are some of the new perks that people are thinking about to build that culture, to keep their teams motivated? Well, there are things like running courses on personal finance, right? Like, it is amazing to me how many people, first or second job out of college, don't have any idea about personal finances. Like, how do I build them? How do I use them? How do I get out of debt? Craziness, right? Offer courses in that area. A stipend so people can build out an appropriate home office and they're not sitting on their couch all day with their neck hung down. Give people a stipend so they can get the appropriate office environment. Maybe offer subscriptions to online workout platforms, of which there are a gazillion. I love Aptiv, by the way, AAPTIV. I will give them a pitch. Everyone, there's only so many hours a day you can be on Zoom, right? Like, it is exhausting. It's like being on 24/7. So maybe, do you really need to be on Zoom that much? Do you really need that many internal meetings? And Slack quiet hours, uninterrupted time. Holy moly. Can you imagine if we said every day between 10 and 11 and 2 and 3, no Slack? Those would be your 2 most productive hours of the day. Yep. So think about stuff like that. Skills development, teach them how to get like a mini MBA. Teach them everything about being a CFO so they know how to sell to that buyer, or everything about the financial services industry, or whatever the case may be. And finally, let them know they have access to anything they need for their mental health, and give people off a day a month to go to a spa,
yeah,
go to the chiropractor,
go to
whatever the case may be. Yeah. But they, self-care and being supportive of that self-care is going to be critical for modern companies.
For me, the big one is Slack quiet hours. I uninstalled Slack from my phone because I have the bad habit of responding to people at 8 p.m., which makes them respond to me. So like, I'm the problem. Like, I think I'm helping them, but really I'm making them work when they weren't on. So I need to stop that. And finally, this is my favorite idea, beware the whipsaw. TB?
Yeah, so, everyone's like, oh, we're starting to plan for next year. Yeah, it's going to be great. I don't know, is it? So beware this whipsaw thinking. Just like baby steps, calm, structured, data-driven thinking. It's not a traditional planning season. You do not have to plan all of 2021 right now. You might want to start thinking about Q1.
Yep. Steve, did we lose Trish?
Yeah, she froze. Keep going, Matt.
All right. Well, that was actually the last slide, so that's good.
Hey,
yeah. So
look at that.
Basically, what we're talking about is like, you can't take the playbook for how you plan 2020 and then just take those numbers and multiply it by 2021. It's tough. And I think a lot of planning is like, we have the playbook and we just add 20%, 40%, 80% every year. And reps are feeling pretty banged up, whether they've been through a reduction in force or a furlough or a pay cut or a territory, freeze, hiring freeze, promotion freeze. To hit them at the end of the year with, and do it again next year, but 20% better, probably not the right playbook.
Hey, Matt, so I'm going to throw out it's not so much a question that's in here, but I'm going to amalgamate a lot of them. Let's say that you're a chief revenue officer. Let's say that you have an opportunity to pull a lever moving into 2021. And the lever is upgrade talent, compensation, training, coaching, development, onboarding, all those kinds of things, the skills, those kinds of things, territory alignment, all those kinds of things, quota, territory, all those pieces, your maybe not a CRO, but you're like a revenue
Yeah.
operations person advising a CRO, but who are we fooling? They're going to do whatever you say anyway. Which of those would you likely go to pull first, and why?
I mean, so my background and instincts would be to do all the things that I can do, but I think it's training and development, right? I think it's like, this has been such a mentally taxing year, and it's such a quick and hard change from where we were, that you just need new skills, new muscles, new flexibility, what have you. You know what I mean? It's like, everyone who's doing their job is trying their best, and I'm just not, like, they literally can't reach the next level without help. And I don't think increasing territory or changing comp or buying a new tool is necessarily going to get people that. What I'm hearing from a lot of reps is the pace of change is so much, but none of it is in making them better. It's like just adding new things on top of new change. So how do you like really double down on investing in your team?
I love the answer. Lori Richardson, I'm actually going to call her out by name, said upgrade talent, because she's a friend of both of ours. Upgrade talent. All right, here's my one question about upgrading talent that I didn't have a chance to ask before, which is I'm seeing a lot of people taking jobs that are a level below what they would have done before. And what I'm wondering in my mind is, I get it, you need a check, but at what point do you, if you're being honest with yourself, disengage and not really be in emotionally, spiritually, physically to that job? Do we see like a whipsaw effect when it comes to something like that? Because I'm seeing these like VPs that are now managers, and they don't really love it, but they just have to do what they have to do.
I mean, yeah, I feel like it's going to be macroeconomy dependent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. The number one thing I see, because I don't operate at like the VP level, is mid-market AEs stepping back to SMB, occasionally stepping back to SDR.
Yeah.
SDRs not getting that promotion.
Yeah, by the way, that one's rough. I had someone I hired like that, and it, even though she said all the right things and all the reference checks came out, when push came to shove about 3 weeks, 4 weeks into it, she's like, I just can't do this. I have to go get a sales job.
Yeah, which is fair. But what can you do? A crop of SDRs cannot open up new AE positions by themselves. We're living on a supply and demand constraint. So I just have to have the open conversations. And I don't know what you do with your new crop of May 2021 SDR grads, or their December. Isn't there like when is mid-season graduation? December or January?
Yeah, December, but you don't get usually that many. I mean, really the next batch is going to come out in sort of the May, June 2021 group. We'll see. I don't know.
Let's hope it's back up with a V.
No kidding. But again, I will go back to one thing that's just fascinating is take a really good long look at not just what you're doing now, but where you could go in terms of the sorts of companies and industries. There are certain industries that are doing great. And within those industries, there are people who are doing great, frankly, are not that impressive. So as a sales leader, they're not. As a sales leader, a lot of times you got to stop and ask, is this just simply a rising tide lifting all ships? Or how do we actually evaluate if someone is a good salesperson? You heard Henry talk about that a little bit before. I keep hearing that refrain again and again and again. It's usually some combination of activity level and quality of execution of what they're doing. So what are they doing? How are they doing it with their quality? And then obviously the results, but the results are not just simply always quota attainment. A lot of times it's product mix, or a lot of times it's selling with a higher margin, or like you said before, selling customers that have a higher negative churn or a higher net retention that are better for the business. But companies are starting to look at these things differently than before, because the idea of like, hey, you just happen to be the warm body that was there. They answer the phone when someone placed a $500,000 order. Like that's over. Like you're not going to club for that anymore.
Yep. I will say to end on one optimistic note, I feel like the AEs who have 5 years of sales experience are closer to, grinding, cold calling, doing the unglamorous parts than those who have 10 to 20 years experience. So it's like the AE crop now they weren't an SDR all that long ago for most of them. And I think it's good. I'm seeing a lot of people who say, this isn't what I signed up for, but I'm going to do what I have to do. Like those muscles still exist, and the tool set's better now, so they're better prepared. So I think that's one thing I'm optimistic about is the caliber of the AEs who are willing to put in the unglamorous work.
I think that's a great place to stop. So everyone, please do check out the Bridge Group. They have an incredible amount of content on their website, and most of it's even ungated because Matt is a lunatic like me. He believes in what's called the 0 moment of truth marketing. What does that even mean, by the way? You told me that term.
It's a Google thing. It's about like when you are right about to make the purchase decision or grab something off the shelf, I think.
Yeah. And in this case, it's all free, but they don't even require you to put your email address in to get most of their content on their website, which I think is just incredible. So you definitely want to spend some time with that, understand what they do. And with that, I think we're going on to our next session. Matt, this was fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
We needed
Thanks, everybody.
What a breath of fresh air. Very different perspective than anybody else I'm talking to right now.
All right, guys. Take care, everybody. Thank you.